All right, so you know how sometimes a business story just grabs you and you can tell right away there's more to it than meets the eye?
Yeah, definitely. I think we all have a nose for that kind of thing.
Well, today's deep dive is definitely one of those stories. We're looking into CJGroup. They're a huge South Korean conglomerate, a real powerhouse. And there's a situation brewing with one of their subsidiaries, CNI Leisure, that has a lot of folks scratching their heads.
Oh, yeah, CNI Leisure. This one's been popping up on my radar, too. What's the gist?
Well, it all revolves around this massive development project they're undertaking on Gurup Island. And the question everyone seems to be asking is this just standard business practice for CJGroup, or is something else going on?
Something else like what?
Like potentially using this whole project as a way to shift wealth and power to Chairman Lee Jae-hyun's heirs. Basically, is this about good business or succession planning?
Ah, I see. So we need to figure out if CJ Group is playing it straight with CNI Leisure in this development, or are they maneuvering things to benefit the family down the line?
Exactly. And to really dig into this, we're going to be relying on some compelling information laid out in the text we've been provided. It gives us a great roadmap for understanding the ownership structure of CNI Leisure, the history of Gurup Island's development plans, and all the financial pieces of the puzzle.
Sounds like we've got some juicy details to work with then.
We do. So here's what we're going to break down for you today. First, we'll unravel who owns and controls CNI Leisure. Then we'll trace the history of Gurup Island, how it went from a planned golf resort to, of all things, a hub for wind power. That'll take us right into the nitty-gritty of the offshore wind project itself, which is a behemoth, by the way. And of course, we can't ignore the controversy swirling around all of this. We're talking allegations of hidden funds, environmental concerns, the whole nine yards. And finally, we'll connect all of this back to the big picture, CJ Group's succession plans.
Sounds like we've got a lot of ground to cover. But if we could break it down piece by piece, I think our listeners will really get a solid grasp of what might be motivating all of this and what it could mean in the long run.
All right, so let's start with CNI Leisure. The text is really clear about its ownership structure, and it's interesting stuff. This isn't like your typical publicly traded company with shares spread all over the place.
Right, yeah, usually you see a bunch of different investors. So what's different here?
Well, the text lays it out. CNI Leisure is entirely family-owned, and it's not just spread evenly among distant relatives. We're talking concentrated ownership. Chairman Lee Jae-hyun's son, Lee Sun-ho, holds a controlling 51% stake. His daughter, Lee Kum-hoo, has another 24%. Then you've got the son-in-law, Dong Jong-kwon, with 15%, and the chairman's niece and nephew with a combined 10%. That's 100% kept within a very tight circle.
Wow, so it's a full-on family affair. No outside investors to muddy the waters. I'm guessing that raises some eyebrows right off the bat.
It definitely does, especially when you consider the history of CNI Leisure and Gurup Island. The company was established back in 2006 with a very specific plan for the island. They wanted to turn it into a major tourist destination, complete with golf courses, hotels, you name it, even residential areas, the whole shebang.
Ambitious. So did they actually start building all of that?
Oh, they did manage to buy up almost the entire island, something like 98% of the land, according to the text. And that's where things start to get a little, interesting. That level of land acquisition right from the get-go, it kind of signals a long game and one that seems geared toward the family's interests.
98%. Yeah, that's not subtle. It almost seems like they were anticipating pushback and wanted to control as much as possible from the start.
That's one way to look at it. But then their grand plan hit a snag. Around 2014, environmental groups and local residents started raising a ruckus. They were worried about the potential impact a huge resort development would have on Gurup Island's ecosystem. And that opposition, it was pretty effective.
So their initial vision got sidetracked by environmental concerns.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But hold on, isn't Gurup Island now slated for a major wind power project? How did that happen?
That's the twist. Instead of backing down, CJ Group did a complete 180. They pivoted away from the tourism idea and went all in on offshore wind power. It's a pretty dramatic shift, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It makes you wonder if the specific type of development was less important than simply having something, anything, that would generate substantial returns on that land.
It's a good point. And speaking of returns, this wind power project is no small potatoes. The numbers are eye-popping.
Give me the rundown. What are we looking at here?
Well, they've partnered with some big names, Daewoo ENC for the construction and SKD&D on the energy side. The current timeline has construction starting in 2025 and commercial operations kicking off in 2028. But here's where it gets really interesting. The projected revenue from this project, a whopping 3.76 trillion KRW. That's trillion with a T.
Wow, that's a serious chunk of change. And what about profits? What's the estimated annual take?
They're predicting around 188 billion KRW in annual profit. And remember, Lee Sun-ho holds that 51% stake in CNI Leisure. It's not a huge leap to connect the dots and think, maybe those profits are destined for CJgroup succession plans.
Yeah. With that kind of money flowing into a company controlled by the chairman's son, it's hard not to see a possible link to succession. And the timing of all of this raises even more questions. The text mentions the government approved this wind power project right before some stricter marine environmental regulations went into effect.
Right. It's like they snuck it in just under the wire.
Exactly. That kind of timing always makes people wonder if there was some behind-the-scenes maneuvering, maybe a little nudge to get things approved before the rules changed. It makes you question if it was just a lucky coincidence or something more strategic.
It does, doesn't it? And it's not just the timing. The text also highlights the strong opposition coming from local communities and fishermen in the area. They're worried about the impact this project will have on the marine environment and their fishing grounds.
Oh, yeah. Anytime you have a big development project that could disrupt a fragile ecosystem, you're bound to have pushback. And it sounds like this project is facing quite a bit of it.
They are, but hold on. Because this isn't the first time CJ Group's dealings on Gurup Island have raised red flags. Remember those land acquisitions we talked about earlier? Well, there have been accusations that they might have used what are often called slush funds to finance those purchases.
Slush funds. So we're talking about money that's not exactly accounted for, maybe even illegally obtained.
Yeah, money that's kept off the books, hidden from scrutiny. And the text mentions that someone who worked with a former CJ finance executive claimed to have direct knowledge of these slush funds being used for the Gurup Island land purchases.
Oh, wow. That definitely adds another layer of intrigue. Allegations like that can really cast a shadow over a company's operations.
And did these allegations lead to any kind of investigation?
They did. The text says that prosecutors ended up raiding both CJ Construction and CNI Leisure as a direct result of these accusations. And to really hammer home the importance of this land to Chairman Lee Jae-hoon, it mentions that he actually personally guaranteed the loans for those land deals because apparently the company wasn't in the best financial shape at the time. That's a big move. Personally guaranteeing loans like that shows just how invested he was in acquiring that land. It definitely adds weight to the idea that these holdings were strategically important to the family.
Right. So let's recap for a second. We have allegations of potentially dirty money being used to secure the land. Then we have a controversial shift to this massive wind power project on that very same land. And all of this is happening within a company that's completely controlled by the chairman's family, with his son holding the majority stake. It's all starting to look pretty connected, isn't it?
Yeah, the pieces are starting to fit together. And we can't forget about Gurup Island itself. It's not just some empty plot of land ripe for development. The text points out that it's actually a crucial habitat for a bunch of endangered species, like kestrels, hawks, and even some protected species of snakes.
It's true. And what's more, the Incheon metropolitan government had actually recommended that the island be designated for ecotourism because of its ecological importance. They explicitly said it shouldn't be developed for large-scale projects, industrial or otherwise.
So the local government was basically saying, hey, this island is too valuable ecologically, let's protect it and not exploit it. But that recommendation seems to have fallen on deaf ears.
Yeah, it's almost like they were determined to develop the island no matter what. And the critics quoted in the text suggest that even though the project changed from a golf resort to wind power, the underlying goal remained the same, making a ton of money primarily for the family.
That's a cynical take, but it's hard to ignore when you look at the ownership structure and the sheer scale of the potential profits. It really does make you wonder if environmental concerns were truly considered or if they were just an obstacle to overcome.
And that brings us back to the issue of succession within CJ Group. The text explicitly states that Chairman Lee Jae-hoon has been working to hand over the reins to his son, Lee Sun-ho. Apparently, his health hasn't been the best, and succession is always a big deal in these huge family-run conglomerates.
So the timing of this wind power project, the potential profits, the ownership of CNI Leisure, it all lines up rather neatly with this succession narrative, doesn't it?
It really does. If you step back and look at the big picture, CNI Leisure seems to be a key piece of the puzzle. You have the family ownership, the huge potential for profit from the wind project, and this persistent drive to develop Gurup Island despite all the pushback. It's hard not to see it as a strategically important asset being positioned for the next generation.
Yeah, the text concludes that this whole Gurup Island development might be about much more than just standard business expansion. It could be a carefully orchestrated plan to make sure the transfer of power within CJ Group goes smoothly and that the family's financial future is secure.
That's a great way to put it. But it leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? Is this all about what's best for CJ Group as a whole, or is it primarily about consolidating wealth and power within the family?
Tough question. It's not always easy to separate the two, especially in these big conglomerates where family and business are often intertwined.
Yeah.
But the fact that CNI Leisure is 100% family-owned certainly leans towards the latter interpretation.
So let's do a final recap for our listeners. We've seen how CNI Leisure, which is completely owned by Chairman Lee Jae-han's family, with his son, Lee Sun-ho, holding the majority stake, switched gears from a golf resort to this massive wind power project on Gurup Island. And while it's going to take a big investment of 1.3 trillion KRW to get this project up and running, they're predicting a massive return, 3.76 trillion KRW in revenue and about 188 billion KRW in profit every year. And those profits, they'll be flowing directly to Lee Sun-ho and his family.
We've also highlighted those allegations that CNI Leisure might be a crucial tool for moving wealth around and ultimately bankrolling the succession plan within CJ Group. And then there are the environmental concerns, the local communities and the fishermen who are all pushing back against this development. Plus, we can't forget about those past allegations of slush funds being used to buy up the land in the first place and the fact that Chairman Lee Jae-han personally guaranteed those loans. All of that just underscores how important this whole venture is to the family.
Oh, and that timing of the wind project's approval. Right before stricter environmental regulations were put in place. Yeah, that definitely raises some eyebrows and makes you think about whether things were done by the book.
It does. And at the end of the day, despite the change from a golf resort to wind power, the fact remains. CNI Leisure is 100% owned by the family, and it's poised to generate huge profits. That points pretty strongly to its central role in CJ Group's succession strategy.
So here's what we want you to walk away with today. Think about everything we've uncovered here. What does this case tell us about the intersection of big business, family wealth, and how that impacts things like regional development and environmental protection? Are those interests aligned, or do they clash? And what does that mean for the rest of us? What are the broader societal implications of projects like this?
Exactly. It's about asking the tough questions. What's really driving these massive projects? Is it genuine progress or something else? And how do we make sure there's transparency and accountability every step of the way? That's what we need to be thinking about.
So there you have it. Another deep dive complete. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time.